Welcome to the Action Network studio in New York City. I'm Maria Marino, and this is Green Dot Daily. We're live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube channel and the Action app. On today's show, we're less than a week removed from the NFL draft, so we will help you get a head start on that futures market. Plus, Bryce Harper is back, so should you bet the Phillies? We'll get into it. But we start with some NBA. And check out this market report on the Western Conference semis, Game 1 tonight. 40% of the bets and 54% of the money is coming in on the Lakers to cover 4.5, while 61% of bets and a whopping 90% of money is on the game to go under the total. Here to get some context on this matchup, we have our Director of Research, Evan Abrams, and Action Network Senior Writer, Matt Moore. So, Evan, what are the trends we need to know going into this?
Man, it's always rust versus rest. And that seems to be the conversation, especially when you get deeper into the playoffs and in game ones. But I'll give you some data. So the Lakers, 4 days rest entering this game. The Warriors only on 2 days rest. In our Bet Labs database, in game ones, teams on 4+ days rest facing a team on 2 days rest or less, 33-19-1 against the spread. And if you look at the second round or later, it's 30-17-1. So definitely an advantage there. And then you're going to look a little further here. So teams who are coming off of a Game 7 series are 33-51 straight up in Game 1 and 36-48 when you look at the entire series as a whole. So the advantage is there. I think it's probably there more in the Game 1, Game 2, which ends up impacting the series as a whole versus the later games. But I'm curious what Matt thinks about this, especially from like a betting angle.
Yeah, it's tough. We're going up against a pretty brutal trend here because we've got this Game 7. Teams are tired. Now, I will say that a lot of those games are on the road, right? Like worst teams go longer in series and then they run up against favorites. So it's rare that you have a home team coming off a Game 7 in this spot. So home favorites have done a little bit better than that. You're also going up against LeBron in Game 1s where LeBron's really terrible in Game 1s. 3 and straight up, 4 and 7 against the spread in Game 1s as a road dog. 4 and 10 straight up, 5 and 9 against the spread on the road overall. So like you have this trend here where LeBron has not been good in Game 1s. He tends to take them as what he's referred to as like feel out games. He wants to get a sense for what the series is like. Spoiler, can't do that here. Team's not good enough. This is not the Cavs. Would advise against that there, LeBron. All this said, trying to figure out how to take an approach on this, I wind up on Lakers plus 4.5. I don't want to bet against the Warriors on the money line. I do think that plus 4.5 or 5, where the market is in some places, there's value on that. Now, I will say, look, this season and since 2021, dogs that cover have won outright 79% of the time. That's what we call the Matt Mitchell stat around here. So, like, that's an important one to keep in mind, is that dogs that cover do tend to win outright in the playoffs recently. I will go ahead and just take the points, though. I think the Warriors win. I do think this number is too much based off of the Game 7 trend that the Warriors are facing. I will go ahead and grab the points, but I do not want to take the money line on the Lakers.
I feel like that's kind of a nice happy medium for you, Matt, because you're kind of between a rock and a hard place with a trend that's anti-Warriors and also a trend that's anti-LeBron. Now, moving on, also on the docket tonight, Heat-Knicks Game 2. Like the Celtics, the Knicks could not capitalize on home court advantage in Game 1. So, Evan, what are the trends you're seeing for this type of situation?
So I think the smart way to look at this is like we did in Game 1, look at it the same way in Game 2. So Miami has been a second-half team, while the Knicks have been a first-half team. So Miami is 7-1 second-half ATS in the playoffs right now, best in the NBA. And then you look at the Knicks, 56-31-1 first-half ATS, regular and postseason, best in the NBA. So I think looking at it that way, you would say, hey, maybe an exacta, maybe Knicks first half, Miami full game, which hit in Game 1. The one thing I do want to add is, and we've talked about the zigzag theory a lot of times, but I think this actually might be the new age zigzag theory, which is the first half after a loss, which actually hit with the Suns last night. Well, they hit the first half, they lost the full game. So teams off a straight up loss, 28-19 first half ATS this year, and 76, 53, and 1 over the last 2 seasons in the playoffs. So a pretty decent advantage. And the only other thing I could add, we've got Scott Foster. He'll be the lead official between the Knicks and the Heat tonight as Matt rolls his eyes and gives all sorts of emotions at the situation. And I'll just give you 2 numbers just to chew on when it comes to Foster. So people do tend to call him the extender. So team who loses game 1, when you have Foster as the official in game 2, 21-12 against the spread. That is second of 62 officials in the Bet Labs database. And then let's just look at home teams overall with Foster. 110-72 against the spread over the last 3 years, 42-23 against the spread this season. So just an insane advantage there when you look at the ref. Now, a lot of that's noise, but boy, is it fun.
This is so strange. All of the stats with Scott Foster, and I guess it's just because he's been doing this for so long, but it's like he's helping a cause that already, like, I know teams that lose game 1, going into game 2, they're already kind of who you expect to bounce back. So he's kind of just aiding in that effort. But Matt,
I will say this, 3 games under 500 for teams who lose game 1 and game 2 against the spread overall. So if you look back since 2005, it's basically a 50-50 proposition, but Foster seems to have the magic. Matt, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask Matt, like, all right, which team do you like better coming off of that home loss in game 1, the Knicks or Celtics?
I like both of them, but I will say I lean definitely toward the Knicks here. There's a feeling amongst teams, you get that first game, and you've done your work. You've gotten the split, right? Because if you protect home court and you're up 2-0 and you go to the other building, you're like, if we win one of these, we're good. We're up 3-1. Series is effectively over. It's just kind of inverted now. Like the shift becomes, don't burn too much energy. Be ready to take care of business at home. Then you're up 3-1. We got the hard part. With Butler hurt on top of Hero and Oladipo, there's just not a lot of reasons for the Heat to go full bore here. The Knicks are going to come out house of fire, and you have to meet that energy and exceed it if you're going to be able to win on the road in a desperation spot. Why burn yourself out? Let them burn that energy out. You focus on game 3, getting back home. You do that, and you can take care of business. Even if Jalen Brunson is limited, if Julius Randle plays, I like the Knicks a little less, to be perfectly honest with you. But in general, I think the Knicks are probably going to take care of business, like the first half trend there as well. I would actually go the other way and just play Knicks first half, Knicks money line, put that together in the same game potentially. The Celtics line, it remains too high. It only went to 9 now, which by like my numbers have this 4.5 fully healthy. So Embiid's worth 4.5 points to the spread. That's no, I'm sorry, that's not accurate. 3.5 is about as high as I'm willing to go for even a player of Embiid's MVP caliber level of player. I don't think that you can really get there. Likewise, the first half, the books have adjusted to this trend and have been increasing it. It's one thing when we go from this, the first half line standard would be a 3 to a 4. It's another thing when we go from this should be a 4.5 and we go to a 6. Now we're starting to talk about we just don't have the edge versus what the line is suggesting. This line being 9 is still stupid. Like, I have to lean towards the Sixers ATS here. I don't want to bet it because of the spot. Celtics have to win this game.
Right.
They're the better team. They should win this game. I don't expect Joel Embiid to play, but between the two, I am definitely going to lean Knicks. I am on the Knicks here in this game, and I will be taking Evans' trend and applying it to the first half as well.
I totally get why you're on the Knicks, and for the record, I expect them to win here as well, but I'm just gonna throw this out there. I saw some video footage on Jimmy Butler's Instagram. He was walking around New York City, which I don't know if that's necessarily good or bad for all the treatment he was getting, but he is sightseeing, and just wonder if he's gonna play. But that's just me speculating. Matt Moore, Evan Abrams, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Green Dot Daily is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,000 paid back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's welcome in Chad Millman and Simon Hunter from the Favorites podcast. And we've had some time now to recover from a wild draft week. And as you digested the draft, Chad, were there any bets that you made, particularly with regard to Offensive Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, look, I thought the draft was insane and super fun to watch and all those trades happening. But look, one of the most surprising picks, I think, at the end was Bijan Robinson, the running back from Texas, going to the Falcons at number 8. And a lot of people felt like this was the guy who was probably 1, 2, or 3 in terms of the best football player in the draft. But obviously, over the years, you have been drafting running backs lower and lower, either low first round, second, third round, because of the value and the dollars, et cetera. But he is in a spot going to the Falcons where he's got a coach who knows the value of leaning into a running back with Arthur Smith, who obviously was the Titans coordinator, and coaching Derrick Henry. And he's got a quarterback in Desmond Ridder who is still developing and is going to need to lean into a running back. There's a great stat that Brandon Anderson from Action Network has written about in the past, where in 14 of the past 18 drafts, a Offensive Rookie of the Year came from the top 12 picks. Well, Bijan is in the top 12, and I know there's a lot of talk about quarterbacks and what can Anthony Richardson do, what will Bryce Young do, what will C.J. Stroud do with the Texans, but at the end of the day, I don't think any of them have the supporting cast and the opportunity to do what Bijan does in Atlanta.
I feel like there's oftentimes opportunity for running backs because they tend to play right away. And that brings me to the idea of quarterbacks, which you mentioned, Chad. And Simon, we know your guy has been Anthony Richardson. Is he your play for Offensive Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, I still love the value on Anthony Richardson. I think it's at most books it was plus 800. Now it's down to plus 700. It's one of those numbers that makes sense. Gardner Minshew right now is slated to be the starter of the Colts. Will he be? Most likely not. We've already heard ownership come out and talk about they want to get this going. They want to take the new air that Jim Irsay already talked about. They want Anthony Richardson to be the guy. They draft him to be the guy. They expect him to be the guy. And we're in the very unique situation of the Colts aren't that terrible, right? Jonathan Taylor had a really bad injury-plagued year last year. You bring him back. You have Michael Pittman on the outside. They have the weapons there where Bryce Young, he's not in that situation, doesn't have the weapons. C.J. Stroud does not have the weapons. I think Anthony's in the best win-now situation. If he can just get the 7-10, 6-11, I think he could get Rookie of the Year. So to me, I like the idea where Chad's coming from. Robinson's probably the best player out of all these guys. But if I'm going just what the media wants, what the fans want, it's a quarterback award. They tend to give it to the best quarterback. Even if they don't play that well, they get the wins. I mean, Kenny Pickett barely played last year, and he almost won Offensive Rookie of the Year. So to me, Anthony is the best athlete. If he wins a couple games, I could easily see Anthony taking it. So at plus 700, plus 800, that's a good number to take this kid at.
I understand that it's what media and fans want, but there was also a bit of a narrative about the readiness of Anthony Richardson, and I have to give credit to my producer Gifford who brought this up. Like, is he going to be ready personally to start right away?
I mean, that's impossible to know. Like, guys have played 4 years, like Matt Leinart played 4 years at USC. Was he ready to play for Arizona? Hell no. So I'm with people. Like, you always get the Mitch Trubisky's of the world, the guy that plays for one season, gets drafted high, and then kind of fades away. Mitch was really good his rookie year. So I kind of like it. They hasn't played that much because sometimes they're not thinking. They're just reacting. They're just doing what their coaches says to do. So I get that. That's kind of a negative towards Anthony Richardson. But he's in such a good landing spot. I can't really see that bite him in the butt there.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move over to win totals. And after the draft, was there any team in particular, Chad, that you felt like it's time to bet them?
Well, look, I feel like the Ravens had a tremendous draft, and all the talk last year was about Lamar Jackson and then Lamar Jackson being injured and the Ravens cycling through quarterbacks and their receivers having the fewest receiving yards combined of any team in the NFL. So what's happened during what I call acquisition season between the Super Bowl and the draft? They re-signed Lamar Jackson. They signed OBJ. They drafted Zay Flowers. Oh, by the way, J.K. Dobbins, who was injured for much of last year, was averaging 99 yards rushing per game in the last month of the year. And this is a team that nearly beat the Bengals with a backup quarterback. And you got John Harbaugh, who's won 8 games in 14 of his 15 seasons in the NFL. I'm a sucker for a Ravens futures bet every single offseason because I love their franchise. I love the stability. I love the pieces they've added. Give me the Ravens over 9.5.
I hear you. I mean, just the fact that Lamar Jackson finally re-signed, like I still haven't wrapped my head around it, even though I kind of expected that all along. But that being said, Simon, what about you? Any team that you felt high or low on coming out of the draft?
Yeah, playing off of Chad here, I thought it was in a good spot to take the Bengals under 11.5. That number is just too high in a division that's way better than it's been these last couple of years. I think Pittsburgh came out as one of the best teams that drafted this year. Again, who really knows how well they did? But to me, they have a couple guys that could start now in Pittsburgh. We know the Browns are going to be better with Watson. And Chad just nailed it on the head with the Ravens. The Ravens are going to be much better than they were last year. I think they should have won the division last year. The Bengals got really lucky that different players went down for the Ravens. There was different little injuries. So, just going off of that, 11.5 for the Bengals, too much respect, way too much respect. So this number should be closer to 10.5. We're getting a free game here. So it's juiced to the under now. I still like it at minus 120, 11.5 under for the Bengals.
Chad, what I just heard out of that whole thing was that you nailed it on the head with the Ravens. Can you believe Simon's giving you the credit?
I'm so glad you said that because if you hadn't jumped in, I would have to jump in and be like, Maria, the only thing that mattered in that conversation, Chad nailed it.
Nailed it. I think both of you nailed it. All right, guys, thanks for coming on. And as always, you can catch more of Chad and Simon on the Favorites Pod every Tuesday and Thursday. To baseball and Bryce Harper, back so soon? He's coming off the IL just 160 days after Tommy John surgery. Here's a look at some Phillies futures. Odds to win the NL East are at plus 700, to win the NL plus 1,200, and Harper to win MVP plus 2,500. As we bring in our MLB expert, Anthony Debundo. Anthony, we weren't expecting Harper to be back until basically July, but he was medically cleared yesterday. He will DH today. What are your expectations for him and the Phillies?
Yeah, I'm going to not overreact a little bit to the Harper. As a fan, it's exciting, but I think people need to remember that this is major elbow reconstructive surgery that he had in the offseason. He is back extremely early, and it's not too dissimilar to the injury that he kind of came back early from last season when he took a fastball from Blake Snell off the thumb in June. He returned earlier than expected in late August, and he slashed 227, 325, 352. So 227 average, 677 OPS, well below average for that month. And it wasn't until his red hot October that everybody remembers that he really figured it out. So I think there's going to be some issues. He did not take any rehab in the minor leagues to get ready for this. He even joked with Dave Roberts, the Dodgers manager, yesterday. He's going to be terrible for a few days trying to get his timing back. You just can't really simulate live major league pitching until you see it. And so I am expecting some struggles there. I don't really see any value MVP-wise. He's pretty far behind on the counting stats already. And he's going to be DHing or playing first most of the season. He's not going to steal bases. So a lot of the value that Harper brings will not be accounted for in those WAR-type stats. And in terms of the Phillies, I'm also still waiting. I need to get more clarity on what's going on with the starting rotation and how they're going to look in the back end before I invest. They're even money to make the playoffs. Fangraphs has them at 51%. I think it's a little higher than that, but not one that I'm rushing to bet at the moment. So pretty much just passing kind of on the Phillies and betting them on a game-to-game basis. I did bet them tonight, but I think that the long-term expectations need to be tempered a little bit, as exciting as it is to have one of the best players in the league back in the lineup.
Yeah, per ESPN, Harper is the fastest known player to return from Tommy John surgery, but you are understandably preaching patience. Now, moving on to the games today, what are your picks?
Yeah, so Angels and Cardinals face off tonight. Two top 5 offenses against left-handed pitching, and that's what we have in the starting pitcher matchup with Steven Matz and Patrick Sandoval. The Angels made a lot of offseason additions to get better at hitting left-handed pitching. It was a bit of a weakness for them last season. They go out, they get Hunter Renfroe, Gio Urshela, Brendan Drury, and they've been hitting lefties much better. They're top 5 in WRC plus against lefties. Steven Matz, the starter for St. Louis, is coming back from injury from last season. He didn't really pitch much The stuff plus on him is still below average. He's sitting around 96, and his sinker has not been nearly as effective as it's been in the past. So I think he's still kind of figuring some things out and not at quite the effectiveness we've seen at times from Steven in the past, usually an above average stuff guy. So the fact that he's sitting below average is a bit of a red flag. The Angels bullpen's been pretty good thus far. They're top 8 ERA, but I'm really not buying that lasting forever either. And Patrick Sandoval does have some concerning other indicators. His strikeout rate dropped from about 23% to 17%. That's a significant drop off. You combine that with the increase in walks, you have to bump his ERA projection pretty high. And this is just a brutal matchup against the Cardinals, who hit lefties better than anybody in the sport. So I like the over 9. It's come up a little bit from 8.5 overnight. Still like over 9, minus 100, minus 105.
Some pitching concerns in that matchup for sure. What else you got?
Yeah, I'm going to take the Reds. You can split the bet. I'm going to put a half unit on the first 5, around plus 140, and the full game around plus 170. It's a pretty significant starting pitcher edge for Cincinnati here. Graham Ashcraft takes the ball against Michael Wacha. Wacha's fastball stuff plus is comparable to some guys you don't want to be on a list with. Noah Syndergaard, Kyle Freeland, Austin Gomber, Luis Sessa, some of the worst fastballs in all of Major League Baseball amongst starters. And Ashcraft has 2 pitches, his cutter and his slider, that grade out as some of the best within their respective pitch in the entire sport. So I'm really impressed by what I've seen from Ashcraft. He keeps the ball on the ground, which is important against this Padres, top of the Padres lineup especially. And I think they have a pretty significant advantage. These pitchers are trending in opposite directions too. If you take last year's data on Ashcraft and Wacha and you bake it into this year's numbers, Wacha's in a pretty steep decline, one that I don't necessarily think he's getting out of. Whereas Ashcraft, I don't think the market's quite caught up to how much improved he is year over year. I like the Reds in both halves.
All right, Reds it is. Anthony Debundo, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Remember, any picks we give out here on the show, you can easily reference by following Green.Daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. Green.Daily is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,000 paid back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And that's going to do it for Green.Daily. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you back here Wednesday at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube channel and the Action app.